Hello dear learner, I welcome you to the lecture 4 of week 8, and the Republican notion of state is the topic of today's lecture. So, we will first of all understand what are the topics which will be covered in today's lecture. First, as the name suggests, that we will talk about the important features of the Republican state, and then we will see what is the notion of the contestatory democracy. In our previous lectures, we have dwelt upon the meaning of the Republican notion of freedom, and now we will try to understand that what are the essential conditions which are needed to be fulfilled before we can think of establishing a Republican notion of state. Now, what is the Republican notion of state? It provides a vision of state that uses a pluralistic language to rectify grievances so that variety of claims can be addressed. Further, it should aim at promoting freedom. Now, it provides a vision of state which should use the language of pluralism. That means it should be a plural state. And why we need the plural state or a pluralistic nature of state? Because we know that in a diverse society where there are people belonging to different communities, it is absolutely essential that it should be, or the state should be able to listen to the needs, claims and the various complaints of the people who are belonging to different communities, and they should also be able to rectify the grievances so that varieties of claims can be addressed. It should also aim at promoting freedom, and as we have mentioned that the Republican state should promote freedom as non-domination, because ultimately for the Republicans freedom as non-domination is the most important freedom. And we have seen in our earlier lectures that how they have defended the freedom as non-domination in comparison to freedom, the negative notion of freedom or freedom as non-interference. So, it is obvious that the Republican state will aim at promoting the most important or prized freedom, that is freedom as non-domination. It should offer the possibilities for the articulation of the interests of diverse causes like environmentalism, feminism, socialism, then multiculturalism, or it can be any other cause. So, in the first line we talked about that the state should have a pluralistic language, and this point is connected with that point. In the first point, we actually discussed about the varieties of grievances which people may have because of their very contingent nature. In this point, we are talking about the variety of causes which are needed to be addressed by the state. So, the variety of causes may be the causes related to environment, it may be related to women's issues, it may also relate to the problem of the addiction of drugs amongst the youth, it may be related to how to establish a socialist society, or it may be over an issue of multiculturalism. So, it should offer the possibilities for the articulation of the interest of diverse communities and also the diverse causes and issues. Now, the Republicans can achieve pluralism because of the freedom of domination. So, you can see that how they are making a linkage between the pluralistic nature of the state and the freedom as non-domination, because freedom as non-domination provides a fertile ground, or the philosophy of freedom as non-domination provides a fertile ground where the state can actually speak in a plural language. And one of the important feature of freedom of non-domination is that it is dynamic in nature. Since it is dynamic in nature, it is able to respond to the various changes and challenges in the society. It is also able to respond to new ideas. and provide for reinterpretation. So, it can also identify what new challenges are emerging, what can be the possible areas of domination which needs to be addressed. We know that in the present society, we are facing new and emerging challenges every day, and the society and the state has to confront with these challenges by adopting innovative approaches. And this freedom as non-domination can provide a safeguard against any type of oppressive and exploitative practices rise because of certain conditions in the society. So, therefore, the two important points that we could understand is that a republican state should be a plural state and it should preserve the freedom as non-domination, and there is very close interlinkages between the pluralist state and the freedom as non-domination. Now, this freedom, it not only protects against the domination of the private parties, but it also talks about non-domination of the government. So, generally most of the government, or in the general sense of the term, we talk about domination from the private parties or the powerful groups in the society. So, it is essential that the government or the state should adopt measures to ensure that those who are powerful, they are not able to exercise domination in the society. But at the same time, there are chances that the government may itself become oppressive and dominant. So, there is need for addressing the non-domination of the government also. Then the next is, it is socially more radical because it requires not just the absence of arbitrary interference, but the absence of such capacities for interference. Now, this is a it has a very wide application and relevance, because simply non-interference is a narrow concept. But when we are talking about limiting and checking the capacities for interference, then our range of action extends to the social field, it extends to the economic field, it extends to the political field. It becomes very vast, our range becomes very vast, because there can be possibilities of exploitation, arbitrary interference at any sphere of life, at any sphere or in any dimension of society. And when we are talking about checking the capacities, then we are also addressing all those social factors which actually determine or are responsible for exploitation and domination in the society. It can be because of the existence of private property, whether land or capital. It can be because of the affiliation with a certain caste group or class. It can be because of being belonging to a particular community or religion. It can be anything, or maybe a particular gender. So, there can be multiple points where an actor can stand at that point and indulge in exploitative practices. So, therefore, in terms of social perspective, this notion is very radical in nature. It talks about massive change and transformation in the society. Another very important point which actually needs to be understood when we are talking about the republican theory of state is that Philip Pettit argues that the notion of the republican state is not simply to make policies, but it is a research program for policy making, not a once for always document or blueprint. This means that it is dynamic in nature and does not have a fixed doctrinaire. So, generally most of the time we find that the emphasis of the government is on policy making, and most of the time it is based on certain blueprint. In the case of the republican state, the process of policy making is dynamic in nature. It is not based on any fixed doctrinaire or principle or blueprint. It is evolving with the changes in the society or with the demands of the hour, and therefore, a very important word is used. It is a research program The government is continuously engaging in research in policy making, so that how we can adopt or we can formulate better and better policies for the welfare of the people. It is always thinking about adopting the innovative measures or more appropriate measures to address the newly emerging challenges in the society. So, a very important thing, it is not following the age old practices or the traditional blueprint for policy making, but it is talking about doing research, means finding out new methods, new means or new objectives for policy making. So, this is I think one of the very important point about the Republican state, which has been argued upon by Philip Pettit. Whatever policies they make with respect to the various aspects of the government, they are based on the Republican philosophy. So, whether they are making policies with respect to defense or with respect to home ministry or with respect to the food or the clothing or for that matter any aspect of or any areas of policy making, it will be in accordance with the philosophy of the Republican state. So, the philosophy we have understood, now we can understand that how the policy making actually will take place. Now, the Republican state is not merely concerned with how private property may give rise to domination, but also to check the possibilities of domination associated with the state. It is also concerned with the aims and forms of the state. So, this is a very important question even before the Republican scholars. How to ensure that the Republican state, which is meant for ensuring that freedom as non-domination is protected and enforced, how can we enforce or how can we ensure that the state, the same state is not itself becoming an instrument of domination. So, therefore, it is extremely important that there should be certain checks, there should be certain legal and constitutional measures which can protect the state or which can prevent the state from becoming a dominant structure. Also, it is concerned with the aims and forms of the state. Now, what type of state we require and what type of government? These are the questions which are also very important and pertinent for the Republicans. Secondly, what should be the objectives of the government? So, objectives and forms also constitute very important part of the Republican notion of state. Now, in the Republican traditions, it has been stressed that the state must act according to constitutional provisions if the arbitrariness of the state is to be avoided. So, that is the only, I think, and the most effective and time tested method of checking the arbitrariness of the state, and that is having a written constitution with well specified rules and regulations which will guide the functioning of the government, which will have detailed provisions about the power and duties of the various wings of the government. If the state or the government functions according to a written constitution, there are very possibilities that the state will not be acting in an arbitrary manner. Of course, the vigilance of the people is also equally important besides having a written and detailed constitution. Another very important aspect of the Republican notion of state is that there should be rule of law. Rule of law has been derived from the Roman tradition and it is considered as one of the very important and essential element of the Republican state. And this rule will be formulated by well established procedures. It will be non-retrospective, that means it will not be applicable to those actions or activities or crimes which were committed before the laws were formulated, and it should be precise in nature, it should be specific, it should be clear, it should be concise. So, these are some of the features of law which are very essential so that the government can function according to law. According to well established procedures, the law should be formulated. Now, in order to ensure that the state is not exercising dominance, the most important check after having the constitutional provisions, and it is also one of the part of the constitutional provision, is to have a decentralized nature of power distribution. Now, the objective of power distribution can be achieved in a multiple ways. We can have a federal system of government where the power is distributed between the center, state and the local level. Then we can have the separation of power where the power is divided as per the functions between three important wings of government, and that is executive and then legislature and judiciary. And we can also have dual legislature or bicameral legislature, which can also help in the division of power, and there are less chances that the abuse or misuse of power will take place. So, decentralization of power is another aspect of the non-dominant, or to ensure that the state is not turning dominant at some point of time. It talks about the arbitrariness of the majoritarian exercise of power in a state. For that, there should be constitutional provisions to ensure that the majority cannot bring about changes in certain fundamental areas of law. Now, this is very important, and especially in a democracy where the rule is being done by the majority vote and the party which has won the majority comes to power and forms a government. The question arises that what about the minorities and the representation of their interest? What will happen if the majority, it turns authoritarian in nature and it tries to dictate the minority and may even try to violate the rights of the minority? And what will happen if the majority tries to make changes in the fundamental laws of the constitution, or it tries to make certain changes, fundamental changes, which may affect the rights or the interest of the minorities? So, therefore, it has been argued that there should be constitutional provisions to ensure that the majority are not able to bring about changes in the fundamental laws of the land. So, that is what the Republican notion has been talking about, to have institutional checks, to have certain measures, so that at any point of time in future, the chances of domination or chances of interference cannot be done or cannot be conducted by any dominant party or party who is in a dominant position. Now, there is an element of discretion in the functioning of government, because in making laws, implementation and even interpretation, we know that certain discretion is exercised by the members of the government and also judiciary. Because when the government has to make laws or it has to implement the laws, or when the judiciary is trying to interpret the laws, there are many instances when they have to use their own discretion, because it is not always possible to follow completely as per the rules. Sometimes you have to slightly deviate and use your own discretion to help in the formulation or in the implementation of policy making, or you may give an interpretation to the law which may be very unique in nature. So, there are possibilities and there are chances that certain discretion will be exercised by the members of the government and judiciary. Now, to check that and to ensure that such exercise of discretion is only limited in nature and it is not detrimental to the interest of the people, there has to be systemic possibilities to check the doings of the government. Now, this is very important. The check should be there in the system itself. It should not be non-specific or it should not be non-institutional. There should be proper measures which are embedded in the system, so that if certain discretion are exercised in a way which is not in the interest of the people, then it can be declared null and void, or it can be challenged, and it can be that such exercise can be curtailed in the future. Now, Philippe Petit argues that there is need for a democratic state. Of course, if you want to have a plural state, if you want to ensure that the citizens are enjoying freedom and there is no domination whether by the state or by any other institutions in the society, and most importantly, if you want that people should participate in the governance of the country, they should actually ensure their development by making a public participation, then it is essential that we need a democratic state. But that democratic state will not be the traditional type of democratic state, which will be based merely on the consent and will of the people, because that is the traditional notion of democracy, where the democracy believes in rule by the people, for the people and of the people, based on the consent of the people. That is only one element. It is an important element, but that is only one element. There are some more important elements which needs to be understood, and that important element is highlighted in the republican state, where there will be power to the people to contest the decisions and acts of the government. I think this is the most important power which the people can have in a democracy. Right to vote, right to contest election, right to win and form the so called government in the center or state, they are important aspects of democracy. But from the people's perspective, what is more important is that whether people are having the opportunity and the power to contest the decisions and acts of the government, that is actually what should be the basis of a democratic state. The important point which should be stressed is that the work of the government should survive the popular contestation. So, it is not simply based on certain populist measures. The government should come to power, or simply on the basis of on certain consensus. Government should come to power, but it should come to the power only after it has survived all the contestations, all the criticism, all the challenges which has been posed, all the questions which has been posed by the people to its various policies and programs. So, we have at the last the final topic of today's lecture, that is the notion of contestatory democracy. Now, we have already understood that what we mean by contestatory democracy. A democracy which allows the people to contest the actions of the government, and therefore, there is no doubt that such type of democracy will be deliberative in nature, where the decisions are taken based on common concern and the people are having the opportunities to challenge the government. So, it is not simply that there will be debate and discussion amongst the people where they will actually deliberate on issues of their concern and come to a consensus, as we have seen in the case of Habermas, but also people will have the opportunities to challenge the government, and this is one of the most important aspects of the contestatory democracy. Now, one of the important feature of this contestatory democracy is that it is inclusive in nature. It has to be inclusive in nature, because people only then can people from every corner of the society are able to raise voices against the government. Otherwise, how they are going to prevent various types of domination and injustices against them? If they are not able to participate in the government, they cannot raise claims to the government. So, therefore, it has to be inclusive in nature. People from every corner should feel themselves to be part of the government, and they should not only be able to vote for the government, but also able to participate in the deliberations of the government. They should take part in the decision making of the government. So, therefore, the government should have representatives from every section of the society, and most importantly, the channels of contestation should be well established in the community. I think this is more important, because inclusiveness is very essential, but if there is no agents or there is no institutions or channels of contestation, then what is the use of having the right or to contest the government? So, there should be proper forums, there should be proper platforms, proper channels where we can contest the decisions of the government. And government has also to be guarded against the influences of the business group and other powerful groups in the society. We know that the government comes under the influences of so many powerful groups in the society, by the capitalist group, various business groups, various social groups, also religious groups, and they try to influence the state in multifarious ways, and they try to ensure that the state formulates policies in their interest. They even try to induce the state through various means, unethical means sometimes. So, the objective is to ensure that state is not coming under the influences of all these powerful bodies and powerful interests in the society. The neutrality of the state, the objectivity of the state can be maintained only when there are some mechanisms to ensure that these influences are the least on the nature and functioning of the state. There should be proper and credible procedures for ensuring hearing in the various contestations which are brought against the state. So, we need not only channels for contestation, but when the contestations have come to the government, there should be proper platforms and channels for hearing, proper time, proper procedure, and the people should feel that they are being heard, and the government is genuine towards addressing their grievances. So, therefore, there should be proper and credible procedures, because the word credible is important, because the procedure should be such that people should have all trust in them. So, therefore, there should be proper hearing for various contestations which are brought against the government. Also, there should be well laid out principles for formulation of laws. It should not be based merely on consensus, but the virtues of law should be decided, and that should be based on the fact that they are based on those values and principles which have stood the test of time. It should be time tested. It should be maybe based on some ancient values and principles which are highly regarded in the society. Also, most importantly, people must have the right to challenge the laws if they are arbitrary in nature. If this right is not there, then all the purpose of talking about freedom as non-domination or contestatory democracy is of no meaning. So, therefore, with this I come to the end of this lecture. Hope you have enjoyed it, and the lecture is followed by some question like what are the important features of a republican state and what is contestatory democracy. So, with this I come to the end of this lecture. Thank you very much.